Despite this joyous first chapter in what would ultimately go on to become a full-blown Skywalker saga, being released a whopping 45 plus years ago, as of recording that is, even the most passionate Jedi lovers in the galaxy still haven't managed to spot absolutely every single glorious detail on offer in their many rewatches of this first original trilogy entry. So with that in mind, I'm Gareth from What Culture Star Wars, and here are 20 things you somehow missed in Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope. Or just Star Wars, or whatever you want to call it. Number 20, Stormtroopers were largely left-handed. If you look closely at the Empire's soldiers, and the way they hold their anything but effective weapons, you'll spot that the majority of Stormtroopers are actually left-handed in A New Hope. Far from there randomly just being a lot more left-handed folks walking around in this particular galaxy far, far away though, this was likely brought on by the fact that the E-11 weapons used in the original trilogy by the troopers are based on the real 1950s submachine gun known as the Sterling Mark IV L2A3. This weapon had its magazine clip on the left, meaning that it would repeatedly bang into the chest of right-handed stormtroopers. So those tasked with playing the hopeless soldiers seemingly just decided to switch up the way they were holding the weapon and make their lives that little bit easier on set. Number 19, Obi-Wan doesn't actually say an iconic line in this movie. Of the many instantly iconic phrases that have popped up in the galaxy far, far away over the years, few will ever really be able to top the simple but effective parting salute of "May the Force be with you." And one person who has very much become synonymous with that legendary message is the first ever space wizard to pop up on the big screen in the form of Obi-Wan Kenobi. In reality though, the Jedi also known as Ben didn't actually ever utter that immortal line at any point in A New Hope. While Luke Skywalker's master did unleash a few similar versions of this statement in the form of "The Force will be with you, always," and "Use the Force, Luke," the first use of the most famous version of the quote originally came from General Dodonna before the attack on the Death Star. Obi-Wan would at least go on to say it in the prequels though, so you know, that's something. Number 18, 2 billion folks died during the runtime. According to List of Deaths Wiki, a grand total of 2,1,549,311 folks bite the dust over the course of Episode 4, with 1.5 million of those actually being Imperial crew members who were on board the Planet Killer during the moment Luke Skywalker blasted it with one hell of a reactor core shot. And while Skywalker may have ultimately been responsible for a chilling 1,549,232 deaths during the film as a whole, Grand Moff Tarkin still held the unwanted honor of most on-screen kills by some margin, with 2,010,000,000 being murdered thanks to his destroying of Alderaan early on. Number 17, Alderaan's planetary shield didn't do much to stop the Death Star. If you slow down the shot just as the Death Star's super laser reaches the innocent core world of Alderaan, you can spot that the planet actually seemed to possess a planetary shield of sorts that was ultimately overwhelmed by the sheer power of the superweapon. And while it was actually only confirmed in legends that Alderaan boasted these defenses, and hasn't officially been made a part of canon at time of recording, it would make sense for certain planets to utilize such defenses at a time when the Death Star was starting to make its presence known in the galaxy. Others have argued that this could have simply been the atmosphere igniting upon the laser's impact with it. But either way, the heartbreaking end result was still the same. Number 16, Darth Vader only has 8 minutes of screen time. How much screen time does being the biggest bad in the galaxy buy you? About 8 minutes apparently. That's according to the folks over at Ours. With that site figuring out that Darth Vader actually only appears on our screens over the course of A New Hope for around 6% of the entire runtime. The fact he'd then go on to become arguably the most famous big screen antagonist of all time, in the wake of such a pitiful amount of overall minutes in front of the camera, tells you all you need to know about how impactful the masked icon actually was. Number 15, a specific Tusken Raider beat was actually looped. Long before they were finally being humanized as a people on the likes of the Book of Boba Fett, the Tusken Raiders were primarily known as the aliens who ambushed Luke Skywalker pretty early on in A New Hope. And it's during that first real showing from the Tatooine natives that a cheeky little editing trick plays out under most fans' unaware noses. Keep an eye on the moment one of the Tuskens waves their stick in the air in the wake of surprising Skywalker amongst the rocks. And you'll spot that the person behind the brilliant costume only waved their Gaddafi stick on one occasion. Peter Diamond's solitary move as the Raider was then repeated and reversed a few times in order to create the illusion of him shaking the weapon around a bit to intimidate the spooked farm boy. Number 14, the bantha was played by an Asian elephant. While you may have often found yourself wondering precisely how the likes of George Lucas and co were able to convincingly conjure up an alien creature that looks like something you could very much attach a saddle to in real life, the truth is that this particular bantha actually kinda was. In reality, the horned, gentle giants were brought to life by none other than an Asian elephant by the name of Margie. And while the gorgeous girl was able to get through her required shots in the end, she understandably wasn't the biggest fan of the heat in Death Valley. So the poor trained elephant actually routinely found herself trying to get the annoying fur and horns off her body midway through scenes. You can't exactly blame her, can you? Number 13, IG unit heads are used as dispensers in the Cantina. If you needed a visual reminder of just how unwelcome droids were inside of Mos Eisley's legendary Cantina for a time, then look no further than the dispensers found occupying the bar. Wondering why those containers look a little familiar? Well, that's because they're actually the heads of IG series droids, similar to the one found helping Din Djarin and Grogu escape the Empire on Navarro in The Mandalorian. That droid head is actually little more than a Rolls-Royce Derwent jet engine in reality, and was technically debuted in A New Hope as a dispenser a few years before IG-88 first arrived on the scene as a bounty hunter in The Empire Strikes Back. Number 12, Mark Hamill's helmet words weren't in the script, but his line was still left in anyway. The young cast tasked with being the faces of Star Wars for generations to come weren't exactly the biggest fans of sticking to George Lucas's often questionable script. And one particular instance of a certain actor cheekily finding a way to sneak some of their own work into the finished article involved none other than Mark Hamill and a helmet. While many assumed that the Luke Skywalker actor wasn't aware the camera was rolling during the moment involving the Jedi in training donning a stormtrooper outfit as a disguise on the Death Star, his line of "I can't see a thing in this helmet" was very much done with the knowledge that he was being filmed, according to Hamill himself. The youngster thought it simply didn't matter what he said because no one could see his face, and he couldn't see anything out of the helmet either. But everyone on set actually liked the unexpected line, and so Lucas allowed him to keep it in for the takes that followed. Number 11, it's the only Star Wars movie not boasting an iconic theme. On top of barely showing up in the film, it turns out that Darth Vader was also without his iconic theme tune throughout the first ever Star Wars flick too. How rude. And not only was Vader's debut Imperial March free, it turns out that Episode 4 actually sits as the only Star Wars movie to not once throw out even a version of the iconic theme at any point in the tale. It was only debuted in The Empire Strikes Back, and quickly went on to become one of the most recognizable bangers the galaxy has ever known. Number 10, the origins of certain alien languages. Away from the human stars of the show, George Lucas's first adventure in the galaxy far, far away also brought with it a whole host of distinct alien species that fans would ultimately get to know rather well over the decades. In order to create the unique voices and languages of a number of these brand new alien creations, the minds behind A New Hope decided to use some real-life inspiration in a number of cases. When it comes to the Jawas found scavenging on Tatooine, it turns out that the language you hear them speaking is based on the African language of Zulu, with sound designer Ben Burt speeding up the dialogue spoken by the actors in post-production. Elsewhere, the person who may or may not have shot Han Solo first on Mos Eisley by the name of Greedo was speaking the language of Quechua, a native language of South America. Number 9, a mirror helped achieve those speeder wide shots. With this picture being forged long before CGI was at a level where you could realistically blast a speeder across a desert for a convincing wide shot, it took a little bit of good old movie magic to capture Luke Skywalker whizzing across Tatooine in his chosen mode of transport. In the end, a mirror was actually attached to the side of the speeder, which was moving across the sand on wheels. This reflected the terrain around it and gave off the illusion of the vehicle hovering across the desert. And just to really protect the illusion he was creating on screen, Lucas also whacked some Vaseline on a camera lens filter to ever so slightly blur the base of the vehicle, a method that was ultimately nicknamed the Force Field by crew members. Number 8, Mark Hamill burst a blood vessel and had to be shot from one side. With Hamill's Jedi in training having battled against a dire Noga in the lead up to the wars beginning to close in on our heroes in their trash compactor, the actor felt that he needed to achieve a strangulated look for the scene. So he purposefully made his face go bright red and burst a blood vessel in his eye in the process. In the wake of this embarrassing moment, the crew were forced to carefully shoot around the injury until it healed. And the worst part, Lucas would ultimately confess that with the lighting and red filters being used in this moment, his efforts wouldn't have even been noticed in the first place. This is why it's always best to have a quick chat with your director before attempting something rather silly, isn't it? Number 7, a familiar looking skeleton. While the galaxy far, far away was eventually shown to be one that was overflowing with life and exciting new alien species to discover, However, one of the first real alien beings fans were introduced to was none other than a krayt dragon. Or at least what was a krayt dragon. This particular skeleton on Tatooine belonged to a greater krayt dragon. And far from this being the last time one of these giant Tatooine beasties was unleashed on camera, another one of this particular kind of krayt dragon would actually pop up in The Mandalorian later down the road too. Attacking the villages of Mos Pelgo and some Tusken Raiders during Season 2, Mando and Cobb Vanth ultimately joined forces to take down the intimidating space dragon. And locals on Tatooine also believe that none other than Obi-Wan Kenobi took out a flying krayt dragon sometime after the Great Jedi Purge as well. Number 6, Harrison Ford made up his intercom lines. Harrison Ford once famously noted to his director, "George, you can type this but you can't say it." And with that in mind, Ford was said to have apparently not bothered with even attempting to learn his lines for the moment he tries to convince some Imperial forces that everything's perfectly alright now over an intercom. Instead, the Han Solo actor felt that improvising this bumbling moment was the better way to go. Boring conversation anyway is right up there with the very best one-liners to follow a blaster shot in movie history, and it seemingly came straight from the star behind the galaxy's favourite smuggler. Number 5, Mark Hamill's own number was used on screen. Mark Hamill was originally set to unleash a long serial number to 3PO after just about surviving potentially becoming a whole lot thinner in a trash compactor. Only when it came time to shoot the sequence on the day, the blocking meant that Harrison Ford was closer to the door, meaning that the Luke Skywalker actor couldn't preserve his phone number forever on film. But after begging and pleading for Ford to utter his digits instead, the Solo actor finally acquiesced before firing a "happy now you big baby" back at a Hamill, who quickly realised he was acting like a 2-year-old during the exchange. He seemingly got his wish though, and that's apparently Hamill's own digits being declared by Solo in the flick. Number 4, what went into that original lightsaber sound? You've done it, I've done it, we've all done it. And by it, I of course mean making the iconic noise that comes after switching on a lightsaber, like you're just about to battle Darth Vader in a Death Star corridor. But what actually went into creating that legendary hum? Well, epic sound designer Ben Burtt was once again behind the magic here, using what would have been a rather familiar noise for students at the time, a humming old 35mm projector, and a 70s tube TV, to create what is now unquestionably the most imitated sound the galaxy far, far away has ever produced. Number 3, what you're actually looking at when it came to the lightsabers. And while on the topic of the coolest weapon in the galaxy, the actual physical look of each of the lightsabers found in the first Star Wars flick themselves had very different real-life origins. When you're taking in Luke/Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, you're actually looking at a Greyflex camera side attach flash with a few slight modifications, and a Micro Precision Products flash attachment was used for Darth Vader's trusty weapon. But it was Obi-Wan's lightsaber that proved to be the most complicated, combining an Armitage Shank Starlight model handwheel, World War I No. 3 Mark I British rifle grenade, Browning ANM2 machine gun booster, and a Rolls-Royce Derwent Mark 8 Mark 9 jet engine balance pipe, to create the finished look of the old Space Wizard's tool of defense. What a combination, eh? Number 2, the familiar sounds that went into some sidekicks' voices. And it just wouldn't be right to spend so much time talking about the various familiar sounds occupying the first ever trip to the galaxy far, far away, without shining a light on the noises made by the real stars of the show, the trusty sidekicks. When it comes to Han Solo's loyal companion of Chewbacca, Ben Burtt opted to combine a whole host of different mammals together for his many varying growls and roars, including bears, badgers, seals, lions, and moaning walruses. And Burtt also had a rather intriguing way of bringing R2-D2's various beeps and whistles into existence too. An ARP2600 analog synthesizer was mixed with his own vocalizations that were processed through other effects to create the baby-like cries and sounds associated with this cheeky little astromech. Number 1, Carrie Fisher's accent suddenly changes for one scene. On one rather bizarre occasion early into episode 4, Princess Leia's intense conversation with Grand Moff Tarkin actually sees the late great Carrie Fisher's American twang suddenly flip into a full-blown British RP accent when stood opposite the formidable Peter Cushing. According to Fisher herself, the switch from American to RP in this moment was the result of a number of different factors. This scene was shot on her first day on set, and she had been studying acting at London's Central School of Speech and Drama beforehand. Also, the understandable nerves that come with acting opposite a powerhouse like Cushing, and many of Lucas's lines being notoriously difficult to deliver, all led to Fisher snapping into her British accent for just this one Alderaan exploding moment. The beat was eventually made part of canon, however, with the Star Wars Bloodline novel stating that Leia was simply mocking Tarkin's voice in this moment. Sounds about right. And that's our list. Know of any other awesome details people missed in A New Hope? Then let us know all about them in the comments section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right this second is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Star Wars. May the Force be with you as always. Hopefully you're having the best of days possible, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye bye!